4th, 2020.
I feel like I missed that somewhere, but yeah, as written on the memorandum of understanding.
Do we have a second?
I can second that.
Okay, we have a motion second to reappoint Officer Works to the Smithville Police Department per the memorandum of understanding and effective November 4th, 2020. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, roll call.
Mullins,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
Thorne,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Haas,
Yes.
Heicher,
Yes.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. And welcome back, Christian. I don't know, Chief, was there anything else that you had for us this evening?
No, I didn't have anything else this evening.
Okay, well, thank you as well. We're going to continue on then. The only thing under correspondence is we have the leaf pickup dates. The last two dates will be November 9th, November 23rd. Does anyone else have any correspondence to share with council? If there isn't any, I'm going to move into old business. The first item on the agenda in old business is obviously under the mowing ordinances that we have been talking about. We have the second ordinance that we need to consider. And again, it's ordinance repealing section 93.40 of the Smithville Code of Ordinances, where section 93.40 of the Smithville Code of Ordinances pertains to mowing of vacant lots and keeping down of weeds. And whereas council in the village of Smithville, Ohio wishes to remove contradictory language existing between sections 93.40 and 155.013 of the Smithville Code of Ordinances. Again, this is the one removing the section in our ordinances relative to just empty lots, because under the new ordinance we passed last week, it made it part of property maintenance. So again, that's what this piece would be for. And if I understand correctly, it would be on our third and final reading. So I would entertain a motion and a second to place it on third reading.
Motion for third reading for removing 93.40.
Second.
Okay. And again, this will be ordinance number 2020-27. And again, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion on the ordinance? Hearing none, I would ask for a roll call.
Reed,
Yes.
Thorne,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Haas,
Yes.
Heicher,
Yes.
Mullins,
Yes.
All right, thank you. And since our last meeting, I know that John Hiker had secured basically a company that's given us quote for next year in relationship to being able to obviously have someone readily available to do mowings as necessary. So I appreciate John doing that in between meetings as well. Moving on to the next item on our agenda is that you should have received a copy of the October 2020 income tax report. As you see, it's that we're tracking the income tax revenues, and basically through October, we are down 46,911. Again, keep in mind that about 22,000 of that is reflective of a refund that we had made to the state for an overpayment from the prior year. So when you look at that, obviously, like I say, we're approximately $24,000 down for the year at this point. Again, we have 2 more months. We'll continue to track that as well. Any questions on that? The other 2 items that you should have had, they're not listed, but you should have received in the mailing email. You should have received a statement of cash position report. Again, too, that shows from obviously through year to date, through the end of October. Again, it shows each of the fund balances. It shows, as far as receipts, It also shows disbursements, unexpended balance, and then outstanding encumbrances, shows ending balances for each of our funds within the village. The other items you would have received as well is our monthly revenue report by line item. It shows each of the line items in relationship to obviously those line items and the revenue that we see. Again, it shows month to date and year to date revenue. You also should have received an expense report for obviously the same period of time, October 31st. Again, showing as far as what revenue or what expenses we've had in each of the line items. Again, those are provided to you. If you ever have questions, you're welcome to reach out to myself or Pam or both of us collectively. We would try to answer any questions you have. Are there any questions on those reports at this point? If there are none, the only other thing I did make a note just for myself to mention to all of you under old businesses, obviously you're aware that we've been working to try to resolve an issue with a property that falls under property maintenance on North Summit Street. Recently I had a conversation with prosecutor's office because we had presented, the chief had presented charges relative to that property for consideration. In talking with the prosecutor's office, the decision was made. The one thing that they encouraged us is that given the fact that we initiated this at the beginning prior to COVID, and then when COVID occurred, obviously the courts obviously were suspended for a period of time. Plus we knew that these types of issues probably weren't of high priority. So with that, we had held off for a period of time. What they kind of encouraged us was that they felt it would be better if we were to go back out and to initiate a new, obviously a new referral from John Parker and go back through the process. And this time through the process, we will attempt to make multiple ways of service to make certain that that individual, there's no question in regard to them having been provided proper notification. So we did initiate that. John Parker has completed his review. He did submit some preliminary documents that I forwarded to Jason tonight and also to the chief for their review. Once they've given input, it would be our intent to start the process again to try to initiate and go back before the prosecutor's office with charges for their consideration to file against this particular property. But I did want to update council as to where we were in relationship to obviously that situation. Are there any questions on that topic? If not, then is there any other old business that any of you would have to bring before us? If there isn't, then I'm going to move into new business. And under new business, Pam did send out to each of you our capital improvement plan. Again, as you recall, we are doing a basically all the way through 2025. As far as what we project in each of the categories, as far as capital improvements. Again, she sent that out today. The first page shows each of those for the general fund, obviously the street fund, as far as water system. Again, then as far as the water fund and also the sewer fund. And again, it shows each of those funds as far as what we're projecting as far as capital projects. And then the other sheets that she gave us obviously shows from 2016 through 2020 actual revenues, as well as the expenditures, and showing where our fund balances are, and then carrying forward those capital expenditures for the next 21 through 25 years or 2025 to indicate as far as those spendings in the capital areas. And again, the effect on obviously the carryover balances in each of the funds. So again, she has it for general and then each of those individualized funds as well. Again, if there's questions tonight, Pam did offer that, given that we just gave it to you, if you would prefer to wait to the next meeting, that's fine with us as well. Or if you have questions tonight, I would entertain those and we would try to answer those questions then as well. And I know the one thing maybe I'll just say, I think probably for Matt's sake, the park committee, I know we've talked about a couple of the large projects. Tentatively, do we put those in out years? Because I know it's dependent upon fundraising. But again, it's one of the things as we talked, if in fact we find funding prior to the year that it's in, there's no reason that it can't be moved forward. Because basically those projects are going to be driven by the ability to raise some outside monies in which to accomplish them. So given that they're in the particular year, again, I'm just letting you know that obviously if you have the ability to raise the monies prior to those years, obviously those can be adjusted as well. So.
Yeah, I assume that was the thought process in the placement, and I'm totally fine with how it's set up, and we'll work towards grant funding in the coming years and see what we can pull together.
All right. Are there others that may have any questions specifically? I guess the question, are we comfortable with going ahead and approving the 5-year capital plan? Or do you want to put it off? It's totally up to you folks.
I haven't had a chance to review it, Mayor. Got home from work rather later than normal, and then dinner and family things. So if I would have a question in between now, if we move to wait, would it be appropriate to send that directly to Pam and copy yourself, or is that something that would need to go out to the entire group for the
I would say
clients?
I appreciate that question, and it's not a problem. We can just hold off to the next meeting. If you do have questions, I think it would probably be useful for you to send it to me and Pam and copy the others. That way, then obviously they'll see any response because they may have the same question, or at least that way they have the opportunity to see your question and our response. So I think that would probably make as much sense to go that direction. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So I think with that, why don't we just plan on being prepared to pass at our next meeting? We'll put on the agenda for the next meeting. And again, too, if anyone else has questions, the interim, feel free to send those out by email. That way, then we can try to answer those prior to the meeting. So, all right. I think then probably moving on. I have nothing else in new business. Does anyone else have anything under new business in which to discuss or bring up? If not, then I'm going to move into liaison reports, and the first one is equipment with Scott.
Yes, I spoke with what's the name of this? Mike, of course. Mike, sorry. Spoke with Mike today. There was nothing to report for equipment.
Okay. Moving on to Larry with fire.
I have nothing tonight.
Okay. And police we've already taken care of. Next would be Joseph. Anything for Veterans Memorial?
We've not been able to make up our meeting that was canceled on the 20th. Hopefully we'll have some kind of information that I can send out regarding a Veterans Day event, but up to this point, nothing's been sent out.
Okay. And then moving on then to parks and trees, Matt.
The only thing is, I believe that the tree off of Main Street was taken down today. I need confirmation from Mike on that, though. He thinks Rogue was there this morning. That's it.
Okay. Then going on to streets and sidewalks, and John.
I don't have anything to report, Mayor.
Okay. And then Trish, is there anything for finance and personnel?
Well, I mean, the finance committee did meet to talk about the salary ordinance. I did get it typed up. I'm waiting on the mayor and Pam to give me the go ahead to get that sent out and make sure Jason sees it. And we might be okay to do that on the next agenda. Is that right, Mayor?
I think so.
Okay. I don't think, I'm still also waiting on the emergency plan, the go-ahead from the mayor, so I can send that to you guys. I really like blaming you for this, but
Yeah,
that's
I
all
know.
I have then.
So. All right, so what we'll plan on, like I say, is obviously having something in your hands relative to the recommendation for salary ordinance for next year prior to the meeting. That way, then you folks will have the opportunity to review it. And then what we'll do is discuss that at our next meeting. Obviously, our intent is to pass that because then obviously that will be plugged into appropriations that Pam is working on in relationship to end year. Obviously, it's something we have to have in place before the end of the year for appropriations as well. So. I guess moving on, the things that I have notes to share with each of you. We did receive today from the Bureau of Workmen's Comp a check in the amount of $14,757. Most employers in the state of Ohio know that the governor requested the Bureau of Workmen's Comp to give a dividend to all employers in the state of Ohio, which reflected approximately 100% of their annual premium. Obviously, given the fact that their cash reserves are in the position they are, they wanted to return money to the employers in the state of Ohio, especially with knowing that a lot of businesses may have less revenues. So again, we did receive that, and I thought I would inform council of that. The other things that are out there, you would have received obviously an email from me in relationship to NEFCO. And again, in that email, obviously I shared with you, it related to obviously the question of changing the FPA boundaries that exist between ourselves and Worcester to the west of the village. Again, it's something that had went through county, obviously county planning department, and their recommendation was to leave the basically FPA unchanged. Obviously went to NEFCO. Worcester had requested that NEFCO change that. As my understanding is that obviously during the course since February when they held a public meeting at the Wayne County Library, which I attended, and there were community members there as well in representation of their concerns. NEFCO has made consideration. My understanding was at their last meeting that their recommendation was going to be to pass the regional plan with no changes, meaning reflecting support for the county position and our position. But at that meeting, it's my understanding that Worcester asked for that decision to be tabled. And after that, basically for the attempt to be able to reach out to us. Again, I shared with each of you, particularly those, I tried to lay out the history, particularly for the members that are new, so they have an understanding of where we've been in regarding our position. And again, I guess what I'm looking for is not necessarily a vote, but I heard back from a couple individuals, but to make certain that our position, that you support the position that I am taking, I will be reaching out on behalf of the village to Joel Montgomery from the village or from the city of Worcester. Again, indicating that we would be willing to have conversation if in fact that they will be willing to agree to address the concerns that we had raised in our last correspondence back and forth. At that point that it ended was because, again, they indicated that there was no way that they could agree to the two concerns that we had raised that we needed to have an understanding on. And again, they've reached back out. Again, my position will be that if they're in the position of reconsidering their stance regarding our concerns and the impact upon the village, then there's reason to sit down. If they're in the same position they've been before, I don't know that there's a lot of value in sitting down and having much discussion without their willingness to consider and to address the concerns that we've laid out for them. And again, too, I also today had a conversation with Tom LaPlante. He is a planner for NEFCO, actually with ERTEC. They have a meeting tomorrow morning. He had reached out with me regarding this matter. We had a lengthy discussion regarding it. I think he clearly understands our position as it relates to this. And he was just looking for some, basically for a reassurance or an understanding from the previous meeting in February of what our position is, that he can articulate that to the greater group. Again, too, the other thing that's somewhat not directly, but in somewhat the same topic, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock is going to be the Wayne County Commissioners meeting where they will consider the Egg Security District request by a number of the farmers in that general area. Again, it's a hearing for the commissioners to consider and to approve their request. So again, those are things. And again, I guess, like I said, I've heard from a couple of you, I guess, are there any questions regarding the position that we have or I've taken regarding this request regarding the 208 plan as it relates to the FPA boundaries?
Mayor, I was not one that responded via email, but I do want to go on record saying that I agree with our stance, and I thank you, Mayor, for the work that you've done thus far, and the firmness of taking that stance. So,
Thank you. Are there others?
I would also want to go on record. I agree with Matt. It's, especially if it's at a point where they're not going to be willing to come to the table and negotiate or at least address any of the concerns that you raised as indicated in your email. I wholeheartedly would back exactly what you said.
All right.
I have a sort of a follow-on question. I do support as well as Joe and Matt. But what is your opinion, or what is the group's opinion on this being Worcester's end of the line, or are they just going to keep coming in with these challenges to us? Is the ag security zone in the county plan going to be enough to hold them off for a while? Or we're going to have to keep going?
Yeah, and again, that's a really good question. And obviously the Ag Security District, I think, would be one component in relationship to some of the concerns we have. But if you recall, one of the things that we've asked for from them is some sort of understanding or agreement that this would be their last request. Obviously, that's one of the things that, I've said from the beginning, the argument that they use is proximity relative to that area, and they're best served to provide services to the area. Well, obviously, if we were to grant them any in exchange for other property out in that area, then the reality is once they have that, then it would, beg that they would use the same argument relative to the next section. And that's what, I've raised that, and they've been unwilling to, even consider. They said they could never, bind future administrations or the city of Worcester future relative to that kind of, that kind of request on our behalf. But given that, then there's, in my mind, no reason for us to consider granting this if they won't allow us to have the assurance there would be some sort of buffer that would exist between the two communities. And again, the reality of it is that this argument basically is based on the premise that the best use for that land is development. And again, too, if you look at the county master plan, which a lot of effort was made on behalf of the county in relationship to, soliciting input, that master plan for the county places a very high emphasis upon maintaining the agricultural nature and the agricultural industry in our county. And I don't think anyone can argue with that being some of the very best farmland in Wayne County. So again, it's not as though it's an argument of that it's simply about who should develop it. The question itself is, does it even, or should it even be developed, number one? And is it a better use, which is its current use of agriculture? And again, in my mind, it's kind of a false argument for Worcester to say that it really does not, that it does not allow them to have growth. Well, we're not saying they can't grow, but we're just saying, the locations that are choosing to is not necessarily the best use of the land as we see it. And again, too, my understanding in talking with NEFCO, the individual that is today, they have indicated they respect obviously that, and that's why they believe that it really needs to be an agreement that both parties are willing to sign on to. So again, at this point, obviously, unless they're willing to address those kinds of issues, I don't see it really going forward. Also, I have had conversation with a couple of county commissioners that have reached out to me concerning this issue. And I think both of those have expressed support for us in the position as well. So. Any other thoughts or comments? If there aren't any, like I say, that will be the response that I will obviously share. And obviously I will be willing to continue to keep you all updated as far as anything that might come out of it, as well as the meeting tomorrow concerning the Ag Security District, the outcome there. So. The only other thing I would share too is obviously you're all aware that obviously the site crew is out there at the new water tower site. They've begun some work there. Also too, since our last meeting, at the OPWC meeting at the county, I did present on behalf of our proposal. Bob McNutt from CT joined by Zoom. We did present the project, and preliminary scoring was good for us. We have not heard back since obviously that meeting as far as the the ranking. But once we receive that, then I will bring back to you for consideration whether or not we stand with the proposal as stands, or whether or not we want to change any of it in which to enhance possibility of funding. But once we receive ranking, then we should have a clear understanding of where we stand relative to the amount of money that will be allotted to that process for 2021. So, and again, one of the things that BPA is continuing to have a discussion concerning is as far as an overall plan for I&I in the village. And again, too, they're looking at possibly beginning a study that will give us basically a long-range plan as far as where we attack the issue and where do we start from here. So I think those are the only things I have to share. I guess if there's nothing else that council has to bring before us, I would entertain a motion. We have bills to be paid this evening.
Motion to pay the bills in the amount of $4,253.59.
Second.
We have motion and second to pay the bills that have been presented. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, roll call.
Thorne,
Yes.
Allen,
Yes.
Haas,
Yes,
Eicher,
Yes.
Mullins,
Yes.
Reed,
Yes.
All right. Notes of upcoming meetings. BPA meeting is November 9th of 2020 at 6 p.m. Just a note on that as well. At our finance meeting with Trish, Pam, and Becky, we did discuss as far as being able to provide the option for residents to be able to pay as far as in various other forms online. We should be working on that to implement that. So hopefully before year's end, we may be able to actually provide that as an opportunity for folks to pay their bills. And like I say, that meeting's Monday, the 9th at 6 p.m. And our next council meeting is November 17th. If there's no other things to be brought before council, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Anyway, motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Well, thank you, folks. I appreciate it.